my Accelerated Reader AR Kidsbook Reading Aloud channel. Our story for today is The Princess Mouse, a tale of Finland, told by Aaron Shepard, illustrated by Leonid Gore. AR book level is 3.7 with 0.5 points. Once, there was a farmer with 2 sons. One morning, he said to them, "Boys, you're old enough now to marry. But in our family, we have our own way to choose a bride." The younger son listened respectfully, but the older one said, "You've told us, father. We must each cut down a tree and see where it points." "That's right," said the farmer. "Then walk that way till you find a sweetheart. That's how we've done it, and that's how we always will." Now, the older son already knew whom he wanted to marry. He also knew how to cut a tree so it fell how he wanted. So, his tree fell and pointed to the farm where his sweetheart lived. The younger son, whose name was Mikko, didn't have a sweetheart, but he thought he'd try his luck in the town. Well, maybe he cut the tree wrong, or maybe it had thoughts of its own, but it fell pointing to the forest. "Good job, Mikko," his brother mocked. "What sweetheart will you find there? A wolf or a fox?" "Never mind," said Mikko. "I'll find who I'll find." The 2 young men went their ways. Mikko walked through the forest for hours without seeing a soul. But at last he came to a cottage deep in the woods. "I knew I'd find a sweetheart," said Mikko. But when he went inside, he saw no one. "All this way for nothing," he said sadly. "Maybe not," came a tiny voice. Mike looked around, but the only living thing in sight was a little mouse on a table. Standing on its hind legs, it gazed at him with large, bright eyes. "Did you say something?" he asked it. "Of course I did. Now, why don't you tell me your name and what you came here for?" Mikko had never talked with a mouse, but he felt it only polite to reply. My name is Mikko, and I'm looking for a sweetheart." The mouse squealed in delight. "Why, Mikko, I'd be glad to be your sweetheart." "But you're only a mouse," said Mikko. "That may be true," she said, "but I can still love you faithfully. Besides, even a mouse can be special. Come and feel my fur." With one finger, Mikko stroked the mouse's back. "Why, it feels like velvet, just like the gown of a princess." "That's right, Mikko." And as he patted her, she sang to him prettily. "Mikko, sweetheart, will I be? What a fine young man is he! Gown of velvet I do wear, like a princess fine and rare." Mikko looked into those large, bright eyes and thought she really was quite nice for a mouse. And since he'd found no one else anyway, he said, "All right, little mouse, you can be my sweetheart." "Oh, Mikko," she said happily, "I promise you won't be sorry." Mikko wasn't so sure, but he just stroked her fur and smiled. When Mikko got home, his brother was already there, boasting to their father. "My sweetheart has rosy red cheeks and long golden hair." "Sounds very nice," said the farmer. And what about yours, Mikko? Yes, Mikko, said his brother, laughing. Did you find a sweetheart with a nice fur coat? Now, Mikko didn't want to admit his sweetheart was a mouse, so he said, Mine wears a velvet gown like a princess. His brother stopped laughing. Well, said the farmer, it sounds like Mikko's tree pointed a good way too. But now I must test both your sweethearts. Tomorrow you'll ask them to weave you some clothes, then you'll bring it home to me. That's how we've done it, and that's how we always will. They started out early the next morning. When Mikko reached the cottage in the woods, there was the little mouse on the table. She jumped up and down and clapped her tiny paws. Oh, Mikko, I'm so glad you're here. Is this the day of our wedding? Mikko gently stroked her fur. Not yet, little mouse, he said glumly. Why, Mikko, you look so sad. What's wrong? My father wants you to weave some clothes, but how can you do that? You're only a mouse. That may be true, she said, but I'm also your sweetheart, and surely Mikko's sweetheart can weave. But you must be tired from your walk. Why don't you rest while I work? All right, said Mikko, yawning. He laid down on a bed in the corner, and the little mouse sang him a pretty lullaby. Mikko's sweetheart will I be. What a fine young man is he. Cloth of linen I will weave, and I'll be done when he must leave. When the little mouse was sure that Mikko was asleep, she picked up a sleigh bell on a cord and rang it. Out of mouse holes all around the room poured hundreds of mice. They all stood before her, gazing at her. Hurry, she said, each of you, fetch a strand of the finest flax. The mice rushed from the cottage, but returned before long, each with a strand of flax. First, they spun it into yarn on the spinning wheel. Then they took the yarn, strung it on the loom, and wove it into linen. Some mice wore the petals, some rocked the beater, some sailed the shuttle back and forth. At last they cut the cloth from the loom and tucked it in a nutshell. Now off with you, said the little mouse, and they all scampered back into their mouse holes. Then she called, Mikko, wake up! It's time to go home, and here is something for your father. Mikko sleepily took the nutshell. He didn't know why his father should want such a thing, but he said, Thank you, little mouse. When he got home, his brother was proudly presenting the cloth from his sweetheart. The father looked it over and said, Strong and fairly even, good enough for simple folks like us. And where is yours, Mikko? Mikko blushed and handed him the nutshell. Look at that, said his brother. Mikko asked for a cloth, and his sweetheart gave him a nut. But the farmer opened the nutshell and peered inside. Then he pinched at something and started to pull. Out came a linen, fine beyond belief. It kept coming too, yard after yard after yard. Mikko's brother gaped with open mouth, and Mikko did too. There can be no better weaver than Mikko's sweetheart, declared the farmer, but both your sweethearts will do just fine. Tomorrow you'll bring them home for the wedding. That's how we've done it, and that's how we always will. When Mikko arrived at the cottage the next morning, the little mouse again jumped up and down. Oh, Mikko, is this the day of our wedding? It is, little mouse, but he sounded more glum than ever. Why, Mikko? What's wrong? How can I bring home a mouse to marry? My brother and father and all our friends and neighbors will laugh and think I'm a fool. They might think so indeed, she said softly. But Mikko, what do you think? Mikko looked at the little mouse, gazing at him so seriously with her large, bright eyes. He thought about how she loved him and cared for him. I think you're as sweet as any sweetheart could be, so let them laugh and think what they like. Today you'll be my bride. Oh, Mikko, you've made me the happiest mouse in the world. She rang a sleigh bell, and to Mikko's astonishment, a little carriage raced into the room. It was made from a nutshell and pulled by 4 black rats. A mouse coachman sat in front and a mouse footman behind. Mikko, said the little mouse, aren't you going to help me down? Mikko lifted her from the table and set her in the carriage. The rats took up and the carriage sped from the cottage, so that Mikko had to rush to catch up. While he hurried along behind her, the little mouse sang a pretty song. Mikko's sweetheart will I be, what a fine young man is he. In a carriage I will ride, when I go to be his bride. At last they reached the farm and then the spot for the wedding. On a bank of a lovely, swift-flowing stream, the guests were already there enjoying themselves. But as Mikko came up, they all grew silent and stared at the little carriage. Mikko's brother stood with his bride, gaping in disbelief. Mikko and the little mouse went up to him. That's the stupidest thing I ever saw, said his brother, and with one quick kick, sent the carriage, the rats, and the mice all into the stream. Before Mikko could do a thing, the current bore them away. What have you done? Cried Mikko. You've killed my sweetheart. Are you crazy? Said his brother. That was only a mouse. She may have been a mouse, said Mikko tearfully, but she was also my sweetheart, and I really did love her. He was also about to swing at his brother when his father called, Mikko, look! All the guests were staring downstream and pointing and crying out in wonder. Mikko turned and to his amazement saw 4 black horses pulling a carriage out of the stream. A coachman sat in front and the footman behind, and inside was a soaked but lovely princess in a gown of pearly velvet. The carriage rode up along the bank and stopped right before him. Mikko, said the princess, aren't you going to help me down? Mikko stared blankly at a moment, and his eyes flew wide open. Are you the little mouse? I surely was, said the princess, laughing, but no longer. A witch enchanted me, and the spell could be broken only by one brother who wanted to marry me and another who wanted to kill me. But, sweetheart, I need a change of clothes. I can't be wet at our wedding. And a grand wedding it was, with Mikko's bride, the wonder of all. The father could hardly stop looking at her. Of course, Mikko's brother was a bit jealous, but his own bride was really quite nice, so he couldn't feel too bad. The next day, the princess brought Mikko back to her cottage, but it was the cottage no longer. It was a castle with hundreds of servants, and there they made their home happily. And if Mikko and the princess had any sons, you know just how they chose their brides. The end. Thanks for watching, and I hope you all enjoyed reading with me. Don't forget to like, subscribe, share, and click the notification bell so you won't miss any new upcoming videos. Have a great day!